Hey everybody, welcome back. This is a pretty interesting moment. When I was a wee little boy, I participated in some, how would you put it, unsanctioned practice sessions for my older brother Mark, who at the time, at the age of 12, thought he was going to be an all-star wrestler. This evening, we have a wrestler with us who is nothing if not a legend. Never thought I would have a chance to meet this fellow. It's exciting to know that he's in town with producer Frank Johnson working on a new documentary about his life. It's an amazing story, and it is a true pleasure here on Park City Television to introduce you to Bruno Sammartino.
Thank you very kindly, Terry. Thank you.
Very
Thank you for
nice to
having me.
meet you, sir. Thank you.
Yes.
Frank, how are you? Great to see you.
Excellent. Yes, I am.
Thank you for coming.
You bet.
All the way from Jeremy Rand?
All the way from Jeremy Rand.
Fantastic. Well, it's always nice to know that as we celebrate the arts during the Sundance Festival, that there's still a few.
There's a lot of us up here.
There's a lot.
Yeah,
There's a lot.
yeah.
Bruno, welcome. Thank you for being here. Talk a little bit about this process and the prospect of being the subject of a documentary film.
Well, it started really a number of years ago when a dear friend of ours, Pittsburgh, as a fan of mine, found out that we came from the same neck of the wood with his grandparents and all that, and learned a little bit about my background. And he was fascinated about our experience during World War II and what we went through in hiding from the SS troops, the Nazis, up at this mountain called Valarocca, where we had to spend 14 months there. He found the thing so interesting because my mom, because my dad had come here just before the war, and when the war broke, they closed all passages, so he was stuck here, and my mom was stuck there with the children, and we were very young. And the sacrifice she had to make to climb from that mountain, which was a 24-hour one-way trip, and to come down from that mountain, to sneak into the town like in the middle of the night, to try to get food or whatever, to keep us alive. And it was a long story, but she was captured and she escaped one time. She was shot and she almost bled to death, but she made her way back up there because she knew that we depended on her for surviving. So she showed courage that, my God, I never knew existed. I often wondered in the same position would I have been that tough, that courageous. And so we talk about that whole segment of what took place for 14 months of sheer hell, because there were times when winters were so bad up there that Mom couldn't make the trip to get some food, where we literally lived on snow for 3-4 days at a time. In the spring, sometimes we were lucky because dandelions and stuff would grow up there. And but my mom used to make that journey every week or 10 days. And like I said, it was extremely dangerous because it was always bombing, fighting, the Allies trying to take over the town to drive the Germans out. And so the main thing of the story was that it's really about what a mother and the sacrifices and the love and the strength that she pulls out of somewhere to because so determined to have her siblings, survive and make it through. And so that's the big part of the story, and then shows how I came over to this country because I caught rheumatic fever the last couple of months over there, and I was given a death sentence. They told my mother to prepare herself because I had only a day or two to live. And my mom said, she had already lost 2 children. She said, I will not lose a 3rd child. And I was telling the story about she put leeches all over my body to take the poison blood out of my system, make me inhale fumes from a boiling pot, and all kinds of stuff. And you know what? When a doctor came back a week later or something, he said, he asked a neighbor if I had died, and they said, no, he's doing better. And he couldn't believe it. He said, how could he be? It was impossible. And my mom literally,
She willed you to live.
Yeah, but the story also tells about the first time we made connect with my dad in trying to come to America, and I held my family back because I couldn't pass a physical. I was so sickly, and so we had to wait 3 years before, because everything was in quotas, before my dad could bring us here, and I barely passed my physical, but I passed, and so we came over to America. But when I came over here, I was 13 and a half years old, and I weighed 84 pounds. My dad took us for a physical, and because we were so sickly, that's how we know, because we had it all written down. And long story, I was bullied by kids because I didn't speak a word of English, and I was different in that. And I used to go to school trying to learn the language, and kids just, kids can be, and I was different. And I used to get beat up every day. I come in with a bloody nose, a black eye, a cut lip. And a Jewish boy felt sorry for me, and he introduced me to the YMHA. Actually, it was the Young Men and Women Hebrew Association, but anybody could join. And that's how it all began. I joined that, started working out, and I became really a fanatic at it, to where I built myself up from 84 pounds to 275 pounds in my prime. And then opportunities presents them. I was given an offer by the Steelers to go to camp as a lineman, and then a wrestling promoter saw me on a show on television where they were talking about my wrestling, because I was wrestling in the amateurs, and my weightlifting career and all that. And he wanted to meet me through a friend. I went because they had what they call studio wrestling in Pittsburgh. And that's how I got started. They took me to Washington, D.C., they looked me over, they worked me out with a couple of guys to see what I could do. And I started my training to become a wrestler. The whole story was that I wanted to desperately to make something of myself because of my mom, because of the sacrifices that she made, the hell that she went through. And I wanted to make something of myself that she could be happy and proud that here's a child that was at death's door. And now, and not bragging, but in my heyday when I was 275, I was considered one of the strongest men in the world with my feats of strength that I used to do. And so, we go on with the whole story about how grateful I was that I was able to do stuff for my parents that they never experienced because their life had been so hard all of their lives. And so that's basically the thing. And then we go into the wrestling part of it, and a lot of the stuff. I'm doing all the talking here.
You're a good talker.
That's why we have asked you here today. Yeah. That's fantastic. So many thoughts in even that very short telling. I had a chuckle because I'm not a big guy, but I enjoy to work out, and I noticed the stat that you set the world record in bench press without any wraps on. If everybody works out now, so if you're moving heavy weights, your joints are in a great deal of stress. You set the world record for bench press with no wraps, and you didn't bounce it.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Listen, you had to wear a tank top, and the way the rules were back in those days, you brought the weight down to your chest, and the judge went 1,001, 1,002, clapped his hand, and then you pushed your weight with, you couldn't move any part of the body. And I did 565 on that. Without that 2-second pause, I did 590. Now keep in mind, I started out as a 84-pound, skinny kid.
Possible to imagine.
And I did this when I was 22 years old, because once I turned into professional, into wrestling, I lost all of my amateur standing, and then wrestling, traveling the world, those days were over where I could, because you start getting some injuries in that. But had I continued without going into wrestling, I truly believe in my heart that I would have reached around 650 legitimately. I lost respect for the sport because when the steroids came, these guys all got on that stuff, and so I didn't respect their lifting because it wasn't natural, it wasn't real.
Yeah, they hadn't put in the same kind of work that you had. That's fascinating. In making that comment, I wonder, obviously you have had an incredibly successful career as a wrestler and one of the legendary names from wrestling. Do you have, I don't know, I realize it's kind of a cliche question, but do you have regrets, things that that you wished you had done, or that you didn't get a chance to do, or any of that kind of thing, or did you hit them all?
Funny you ask that because I questioned a lot of things in my lifetime. Here's the thing, okay, when I came over from Europe, couldn't speak a word of English, okay? So I barely went through high school. The thing is that what choice did I have? I started working construction as an apprentice carpenter. I wanted my family, when I got married and children, I wanted them to have a better life than certainly I had known up to that time. I wanted to do some for my parents, and because I know what they went through and my mom. So I wasn't crazy about wrestling when I found out what it was all about, that I had to travel all over the world. I mean, Japan, Australia, South America, South Africa, I mean, in Hong Kong, Singapore, everywhere you went. And the money wasn't that big, but for me, I was extremely grateful because I never had anything,
right.
And now this is the 60s, and like you're making 125,000 a year, and
that's a lot of money.
Yeah, you know, everybody used to tell me you should be making more because you sell out the garden every 3 weeks or whatever. The newspaper guy says to me, "You're being cheated, this and that." I thought to myself, "Are you kidding? I'm a nobody from the other side, and I'm making this kind of money. I should complain." Yeah. I mean, that was my attitude. Yeah. But more importantly, I was able to do things with my parents that they never experienced. Taking them to the finest restaurant, sent them my mom, because my dad wouldn't go back, send her back to Italy because she had family there. Things like that. Give a huge party on their 50th anniversary. These kind of things meant the world to me. I was so grateful that they lived long enough that I got a break, that I could do some of these things, you know. So all this is all part of the story, you know. The war, the heroics of my mother, and then me and my world, what I got into, what I became. I wasn't happy. I didn't like being away from the family. I don't want to be away so long all the time. I go to Japan for a month, Australia 3 weeks at a time, South America for a month. You know, it wasn't fun when you have a wife, you had a baby at the time. My parents were getting older, and I was always scared something might happen.
While you were gone.
Yeah, this wasn't modern time where you have cell phones and connect, you know.
Yeah, it's hard.
So it was a tough life, I don't mind telling you. But overall, at the end of the day, at the end of the career, I thank God because I was a nobody, came from another place. I was able to get myself to that position, not only to make a better life for my children. I have three sons and my wife and I, but to have been able to do something for my parents that did such sacrifices, and you know, I mean, such a hard life that they had. So when I look at the overall thing, no regrets, because some real good came out of it, you know.
That's great. Frank,
yes.
Talk a little bit about what it feels like to be involved in this project and what it's like to get to hang out with a guy like this.
It's been terrific, but my story doesn't start in Italy, it starts in Jeremy Ranch. Anyway, I was here doing Touched by an Angel for a number of years as a director and a cameraman.
Along with our pal Marshall Moore.
And Marshall Moore helped me. And when that show wrapped, I was looking around for a project to do, and through an assistant camera friend of mine, his brother had a screenplay based on horse racing. It really took place in Pennsylvania, and that's kind of where we went to make this movie called Amazing Racer. Very successful, and Larry Richert was my co-producer, and we've kept in touch over the years. You know, keep trying to do other movies. And Larry called me and said, "Hey, I got a documentary with Bruno Sammartino, and I would like to have you finish it because it was already shot over in Italy, and he wanted me to do the post-production." And I says, "Well, I'll do it if I can do it in Utah because of what I had available here in the state." And Larry agreed that we could do that. So I started putting together a budget and a situation to do the post-production down here. So people I knew from Touched by an Angel, crew, equipment. And then they had a studio here that I came back from Pittsburgh a couple years ago, and I told my wife, I says, "I want to stay home to make movies." And that's why we stayed here now, using the studio as our base, trying to bring in other movies. And this one came along at a perfect time, and now we're deep into finishing the post-production.
And do you guys have a release date yet?
No release date. We plan to do the festival circuit with this film. There's a number of places we can get into that we're going to do. I do have some distributors that are talking to me, telling me, you know, they can market this film. We'll like to see it when it's completed, and that's usually the way it is on most films.
It's a good sign at this point, right?
Yes,
Before you
yeah.
completely.
So we're trying to. We got my partner down in California is a terrific editor. She's up here cutting the film. And we're going to try to maybe get Arnold Schwarzenegger a name to narrate some of it.
Great.
And then with that, the distributors will take it on and be able to market it worldwide.
Well, it occurred to me that this level of legend usually only shows up here during the Sundance Film Festival. So for it to be late February after Sundance is over, and to have you here is a great treat.
Maybe next Sundance. We might be with this film.
I'm thinking
that's one of our goals.
I'm thinking exactly that. I read a great anecdote in an interview last week with another great Bruno Mars, the young, you know this story, right?
A lot of people don't know the story. I don't tell, but the only thing I resent about him and his story is that he was interviewed, and I watched the interview at a New York, I think it was, and they said to him, "How'd you get the name Bruno?" And he says, "Well, he says, my dad was a big wrestling fan, and I wrestled at the Philippines a lot of times." And he said, and so when I was born, I was a husky kid, so he named me after this big fat wrestler, Bruno Sammartino. I watched that, I thought, wow, you little. I trained like a dog, like an animal for years. This big fat wrestler. But no, he didn't know. He never met me. In fact, he's coming to Pittsburgh, and I got word that from some of the producers there, they said that he heard so much about me, and everybody always asks him about his name, and that he said if they could arrange for me to meet him. So I said, yeah, I'd love to meet the guy. So when he comes to Pittsburgh to perform, there's probably a chance that I'm going to get to meet
some
this guy.
good Bruno and Bruno shots. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, it's great to have you here. Thank you so much for making time for Park City Television. I presume there isn't any social media or any of that kind of stuff happening yet. Is that?
We're working on it as we speak.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have a website up, and we will go through all that.
And I'll be in touch with Marshall, so we'll make sure to let our viewers know to follow along, especially here in a place where we are so dedicated to film. Any little bits of course, I was changed by behind the music. Everything behind the scenes is just the best.
That's my whole plan, is to make movies at the studio and stay home.
That's great.
In Park City.
Frank, so nice to meet you. Thank you for being here.
Okay.
We appreciate it. Best wishes for a huge success with the film that I am confident in. Mr. Sammartino, thank you very much.
Terry, thank you. I appreciate you having me here.
A real pleasure to meet you. And keep going, man. You're a great inspiration to us all. All right, you guys, quick break. We've got a little bit more music, so stick around. Breezeway is ready to rock your face.